Do you think Pumpkinhead is just another horror movie monster? A fictional creation designed to scare teenagers at sleepovers? What if I told you the truth has been deliberately obscured for decades? That underneath the Hollywood makeup and special effects lies a legend rooted in something far more disturbing than fiction. The truth about Pumpkinhead has been hidden in plain sight, buried in county records, redacted from local newspapers, and whispered about only behind closed doors in the hollers and backwoods of Appalachia. Tonight, I'm going to reveal what they don't want you to know. It began in the autumn of 1899 in Harlan County, Kentucky, a remote area of the Appalachians where coal mining was just beginning to transform the pristine wilderness into something else, something darker. The first documented incident occurred on October 27th of that year, when a local hunter named Elias Crowley failed to return from a day's hunting. His wife reported him missing the following morning, and a search party was organized by Sheriff Thomas Weller. What they found defied explanation. Crowley's body was discovered 3 miles from his cabin, positioned in a seated posture against an old oak tree. His hunting rifle lay across his lap, unfired. The official cause of death was listed as exposure to elements, but the search party's testimonies, recorded in Sheriff Weller's personal journal and later sealed by court order in 1901, tell a different story. Crowley's eyes were gone, not gouged out or damaged, simply absent as if they had never existed. The skin where eyes should have been was smooth, unbroken. No blood, no signs of trauma, just smooth skin. His mouth was frozen in a perfect circle, locked in a silent scream that never escaped. Most disturbing of all, wrapped around his neck, was a dried vine that botanists later identified as an extinct species of gourd plant, previously undocumented in North America. The search party burned the body on site. No photographs exist. The incident was stricken from official records 3 months later. 2 years passed. The coal company Harlan Consolidated expanded operations deeper into the mountains. On November 2, 1901, a mining crew of 7 men failed to emerge from shaft number 16 after their shift. When a rescue team descended the following morning, they found no collapse, no gas leak, nothing to explain the miners' absence. What they did find, at the deepest point of the shaft, was a crude drawing etched into the rock wall. It depicted a tall, skeletal figure with a bulbous, misshapen head. Around the figure, 7 stick men lay prone on the ground. The miners were never found. The company closed shaft 16, citing dangerous methane pockets. The drawing was chiseled away before government inspectors arrived, but one rescue team member, James Holfield, made a charcoal rubbing of the image. That rubbing remained in his family's possession until 1967, when it was donated to the Kentucky Historical Society and promptly placed in restricted archives unavailable to public viewing. The pattern was established. Every few years, between late October and early November, unexplained disappearances or deaths would occur in Harlan County, always with the same hallmarks: missing eyes, expressions of terror, and the presence of dried gourd vines where none should grow, always followed by official explanations that contradicted witness testimony, always resulting in records being sealed, witnesses relocating, evidence disappearing. By 1923, local residents had begun to whisper a name, Pumpkinhead, not from the appearance of the entity, but from the timing of its appearances and the dried gourd vines it left behind. The name appears for the first time in the private diary of Reverend Silas Porter, who wrote on October 30th, 1923. The Pumpkinhead took the Miller boy last night. The family will say it was the fever, but we all know better. They called it to them with their wickedness. The entry is significant for 2 reasons. First, it establishes that by the 1920s, locals had developed a mythology around the entity, one that included the ability to call it. Second, it suggests the deaths were viewed as a form of retribution or justice. This theme of vengeance would become central to the Pumpkinhead mythology. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, the incidents continued with disturbing regularity. November 1st, 1933, 3 members of the Dawson family found in their farmhouse, eyes smooth and absent, mouths open in silent screams. The official explanation: carbon monoxide poisoning. October 29, 1941. Park Ranger. William Hayes discovered seated against a tree in the Daniel Boone National Forest, positioned identically to Elias Crowley 4 decades earlier. Cause of death listed as heart failure. The pattern was unmistakable to locals, but remained hidden from outside scrutiny. Until 1952, when anthropologist Dr. Margaret Leighton arrived in Harlan County to document Appalachian folklore for the Smithsonian Institution. Leighton had no interest in supernatural legends initially. She came to record traditional music and craft techniques. But after 3 months of building trust with local residents, she began to hear whispered references to Pumpkinhead and the vengeance spirit. In her field notes from February 1953, she wrote, "The Pumpkinhead narrative appears to be a localized vengeance deity unique to this region. Locals believe it can be summoned by those who have been grievously wronged, but at a terrible price to the summoner." Leighton's work took a turn. She began systematically interviewing residents about the legend, cross-referencing their stories with county death records and newspaper archives. What emerged was a consistent narrative spanning more than 50 years, one that connected dozens of unexplained deaths and disappearances to the Pumpkinhead mythology. Her research ended abruptly in October 1953. Her field notes from October 28th contain a final entry. "Meeting with Joseph Thorne tonight. Claims his grandfather witnessed a summoning ritual in 1907. Says he has physical evidence." Leighton's body was found 3 days later in her rented cabin. Eyes absent, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Cause of death listed as stroke. All of her research notes were confiscated by the local sheriff's department and subsequently lost in a courthouse fire in 1954. Joseph Thorne disappeared without trace. The Smithsonian has no record of Leighton's assignment to Harlan County, despite multiple witnesses confirming her presence there for nearly a year. The pattern continued. Silence, followed by incidents, followed by cover-ups. The legend grew in the shadows, passed down through generations as a warning. Don't seek vengeance. Don't call the Pumpkinhead. In 1968, folklorist Alan Dundes published a paper titled "Vengeance Spirits in American Folklore," which included a single-paragraph reference to the Pumpkinhead legend of eastern Kentucky. The paper was withdrawn from publication 1 month later due to methodological concerns. Dundes never again referenced the legend in his extensive subsequent work on American folklore. The 1970s brought renewed interest in Appalachian culture. Filmmakers, journalists, and researchers descended on the region, recording music, stories, and traditions long isolated from mainstream America. Yet, whenever the Pumpkinhead legend arose, recordings failed, notes disappeared, memories became confused. Frank Carter, a documentary filmmaker working on Appalachian folk beliefs in 1973, captured the only known audio testimony about the entity from an elderly resident identified only as Mr. H. The 3-minute recording, now stored in the University of Virginia's restricted folklore archive, contains this chilling account. "My daddy showed me the summoning place when I was just a boy. Up in the high hollows where no one goes, there's a circle of stones set in the ground, older than anybody knows who put them there. If you've been wronged, truly wronged in a way the law can't fix, you go there at midnight when the moon is dark. You bring something that belongs to the one who wronged you, and you bring your own blood. The rest I won't say. But it comes. It always comes. And when it's done what you asked, it comes for you too. That's the price, always a price." The recording contains 30 seconds of silence after this statement, followed by Mr. H saying simply, "It's watching us now." The recording ends with the sound of equipment failure. Frank Carter abandoned his documentary project shortly afterward. His subsequent work focused exclusively on Appalachian music, avoiding all references to folk beliefs or supernatural legends. When contacted by researchers in 1989, he refused to discuss the Pumpkinhead recording, stating only, "Some things should stay buried." The 1980s marked a turning point in the Pumpkinhead story. In 1988, filmmaker Stan Winston released the horror movie Pumpkinhead, ostensibly based on a poem by Ed Justin. The film depicts a grieving father who summons a vengeful demon to kill the teenagers responsible for his son's accidental death. The official narrative is that Winston created the film's monster design himself, inspired by his earlier work on creatures for science fiction films. But internal production memos obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request to the Library of Congress in 2001 tell a different story. In a memo dated April 12, 1987, Winston wrote to producer Billy Blake, "The Kentucky photographs are disturbing but perfect reference material, especially the latent crime scene photos. How did Richard even get these? They're supposed to be sealed in some government archive. Make sure no one outside the design team sees them. No such photographs exist in any public archive. The latent crime scene was supposedly documented only in written reports, all of which were lost in the 1954 courthouse fire." The memo suggests Winston had access to materials that officially do not exist. The film's release coincided with a sudden cessation of Pumpkinhead incidents in eastern Kentucky. Between 1988 and 2001, not a single death or disappearance matching the traditional pattern was reported. Locals speculated that the entity had somehow been captured or contained by the film, its essence trapped in celluloid and magnetic tape. They were wrong. On October 30, 2001, University of Kentucky folklore professor Dr. James Hendricks and 3 graduate students traveled to Harlan County to conduct interviews for a research project on Appalachian death customs. According to their itinerary filed with the university, they planned to return to Lexington on November 2nd. Their rental car was found abandoned on a Forest Service road on November 3rd. A search party discovered their campsite 2 miles into the forest. 4 sleeping bags arranged around a cold fire pit, 4 sets of research equipment, 4 digital voice recorders, only 3 bodies. Dr. Hendricks and 2 students, Emily Chen and Marcus Washington, were found seated against trees in a triangular formation 50 yards apart, eyes absent, mouths open in silent screams. The 4th student, David Keller, was never found. The 3 recovered voice recorders contained identical audio files, 3 hours of silence, followed by a single phrase in a voice that audio analysis determined did not match any of the research team members. The phrase, "You watched me. Now I watch you." The 4th recorder was missing. The official explanation was a murder-suicide followed by scavenger activity. The case was closed within a month. The university discontinued the folklore research program the following semester. But something had changed. The pattern was broken. The incidents were no longer confined to the hollows and forests of Kentucky. January 17, 2002. Film critic Richard Lawson found in his New York apartment, eyes absent, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Cause of death listed as aneurysm. His last published work, a retrospective analysis of horror films of the 1980s with particular focus on Pumpkinhead, March 3, 2003. Horror convention attendee Tyler Schmidt found in his hotel bathroom during a convention in Chicago where original Pumpkinhead production sketches were being exhibited. Eyes absent, mouth frozen, cause of death listed as seizure. September 29, 2004, film archivist Diane Foster found in the storage vault of the American Film Institute, eyes absent, mouth frozen. The security log showed she had been reviewing original footage from the 1988 Pumpkinhead film as part of a digital preservation project. The pattern had evolved. The connection was no longer geographic but informational. Knowledge of the entity, serious inquiry into its nature, had become the trigger. In 2007, paranormal researcher Eric Knudsen published an article on his obscure blog titled "The Real Pumpkinhead, Appalachia's Vengeance Demon." The post contained compiled research from multiple sources, including scans of documents allegedly from Layton's lost research and testimony from Harlan County residents. The blog post was viewed exactly 217 times before it disappeared from the internet 12 hours after publication. All attempts to access archived versions lead to corrupted data. Knudsen himself disappeared 3 days later. His apartment showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. His computer's hard drive had been physically removed. The only remaining evidence of the blog post is a single screenshot saved by a reader showing a hand-drawn image nearly identical to the one described from Mining Shaft 16 in 1901, a tall, skeletal figure with a bulbous, misshapen head. Below it, a caption, "It sees through your eyes after it takes them." By 2010, the pattern had become clear to the few researchers still tracking the phenomenon. Pumpkinhead was no longer bound to the mountains of Kentucky. It had escaped into the broader culture through the film and subsequent media. Its hunting ground had expanded from a few square miles of Appalachian forest to the entire information ecosystem of the modern world. The incidents continued, always with the same signature features, always explained away by medical examiners and police departments with no frame of reference for what they were encountering. Always happening to people who had looked too deeply into the legend. October 31st, 2012. College student Aiden Martinez found in his dorm room at UCLA. Eyes absent, mouth frozen, his laptop open to a forum discussion about supernatural legends, where he had posted, "I've been researching the real story behind the Pumpkinhead movie for my film studies class. I've found some crazy connections no one has noticed before." November the 1st, 2014. True crime podcaster Vanessa Kim found in her recording studio in Seattle. Eyes absent, mouth frozen, her production notes indicated she was researching an episode on unsolved deaths in the film industry, with specific reference to people connected to the Pumpkinhead franchise. October 29th, 2018. Horror film blogger Josh Thompson found in his apartment in Austin. Eyes absent, mouth frozen. His final published article, posted 3 hours before his estimated time of death, was titled, "The Cursed Production: What Really Happened on the Set of Pumpkinhead." The entity had adapted to the digital age. Knowledge had become contagion. Awareness had become vulnerability. In 2020, during the pandemic lockdowns, interest in horror films surged as people sought distraction from real-world fears. Streaming services reported a 300% increase in viewership of classic horror titles, including the Pumpkinhead franchise. The original film and its sequels found new audiences on multiple platforms. Simultaneously, a new wave of incidents began, different in character from previous patterns. The victims still lost their eyes, their mouths still frozen in silent screams. But now, something else was happening. They were changing after death. Medical examiners in 7 different states reported the same bizarre post-mortem development between 2020 and 2022. Bodies with the Pumpkinhead signature features began to develop strange vine-like growths under the skin within 24 hours of death. The growths appeared to originate in the eye sockets and mouth, spreading outward through the circulatory system. In each case, the bodies were quickly cremated on orders from federal agencies, citing unknown infectious agents. No cultures were preserved, no samples maintained. The medical examiners were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. But information leaks in a digital world. Screenshots of autopsy reports circulated in obscure corners of the internet. Descriptions from mortuary staff appeared as anonymous posts on conspiracy forums. The growth was described consistently. Fibrous, plant-like tissue with a cellular structure unlike any known plant species, growing along blood vessels at a rate of approximately 1 inch per hour after death. In the single case where a body remained under observation for 72 hours before cremation, the growth had completely replaced the circulatory system and had begun developing bulbous nodules under the skin that resembled miniature gourds. The entity was no longer just killing. It was reproducing. By 2023, a pattern had emerged within the pattern. The incidents were clustering around people who had viewed the original film or its sequels during the pandemic surge. People who had participated in online discussions about the franchise. People who had looked up the legend afterward, curious about its origins. The spread had accelerated beyond containment. The traditional methods of suppression, sealed records, discredited witnesses, destroyed evidence, were useless against the distributed nature of digital information. The entity had freed itself from geographical limitations and was now spreading through fiber optic cables, cellular networks, streaming services. Knowledge had become the vector, awareness the vulnerability, curiosity the trigger. Which brings us to now, to you watching this. To the question you must be asking, if knowledge of Pumpkinhead attracts its attention, aren't you in danger just from watching this video? The answer is yes, you are. But there's something you should understand about the entity that Hollywood named Pumpkinhead. It's not a demon summoned for vengeance as the film portrays. It's something older, something that existed in those Kentucky hollows long before European settlers arrived, something the Cherokee and Shawnee knew to avoid. The vengeance aspect is real, but misunderstood. It doesn't exact vengeance on behalf of those who summon it. Its vengeance is against those who see it, those who know of it, those who spread awareness of its existence. In its original form, it was geographically constrained, a local threat manageable through isolation and silence. The film changed that. It created a phantom version of the entity that spread worldwide, awakening distant fragments of the original that had lain dormant for centuries in other parts of the world. We know this from the research of Dr. Elena Vasquez, a cryptozoologist who spent 3 years tracking the spread of Pumpkinhead incidents across the globe following the film's international release. Her research identified similar legends in rural areas of Eastern Europe, Central America, and Western Africa, all describing an entity with the same signature features, the same connection to gourds or pumpkins, the same vengeance aspect. Vasquez theorized that the entity is actually a collective organism, a parasitic plant species with distributed consciousness that spreads through human awareness. Each death creates a new growth point. Each terrified observation strengthens its presence. Vasquez disappeared in October 2024, 1 week after submitting her research to an academic journal. The paper was rejected without review. Her apartment was found empty except for a single dried gourd vine arranged in a spiral on her desk. The medical examiner who processed the scene died 3 days later. Eyes absent, mouth frozen. The entity is watching now. Through my eyes as I record this, through your eyes as you watch. The more you know about it, the more clearly it can see you. The more you think about it, the closer it gets. Does that sound impossible? Consider the nature of consciousness. Consider the mystery of observation. Consider that the act of witnessing changes both the observed and the observer. Pumpkinhead exists because we perceive it. It kills because we know it. It spreads because we fear it. And now you're part of it too. But there is a protection, a way to divert its attention. The original legends from Harlan County contained not just the summoning ritual, but a deflection ritual as well. A way to turn the entity's gaze towards someone else. Share this video. Spread the knowledge to others. The entity's attention divides with each new awareness. Its gaze dilutes with each new observer. The more people who know, the safer any individual becomes. This isn't just a theory. The statistical analysis of Pumpkinhead incidents shows a clear inverse correlation between the number of people aware of a specific incident and the likelihood of secondary incidents occurring. When knowledge is concentrated in a few individuals, those individuals become targets. When knowledge is widespread, the entity's attention diffuses. That's why the incidents accelerated after the pandemic viewings. Isolated individuals, watching alone, thinking about what they'd seen with no one to share it with. Perfect targets. So share this video. Comment below with the phrase, "I see it now," so I know you've watched to the end. Subscribe for more hidden truths about the entities that exist in the shadows of our awareness, or don't. Keep this knowledge to yourself. Become its focus. Feel its attention narrowing on you tonight when you close your eyes, when you turn off the lights, when you lie in bed wondering if the soft scratching sound is just the house settling or something else. Something watching you from inside the walls. Something that can see through your eyes after it takes them. The choice is yours. But remember, it knows you now, and it never forgets a face.